Hello, everyone. It's Don Cravens Jr. I'm coming to you from the National Urban League's Washington Bureau. Each and every week we come to you and we give you the top 5 things that you need to know that are going on here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Well, President Obama has nominated Judge Merrick Garland to serve as a Supreme Court justice. And you've probably been staying on top of this. Judge Garland serves currently as the chief judge for the United States Courts of Appeal here in the District of Columbia. Now, I want you to know the District of Columbia's Court of Appeal is one of the most powerful courts in the land, known by many as the second most powerful court, only second to the Supreme Court. And so Judge Garland serves as the chief judge there, and President Obama obviously wanted to pick someone who had a lot of experience and who would be a very difficult choice to say no to. But Senator Mitch McConnell and many of the Senate Republicans have said they will not give the man a hearing, and so we will stay tuned to see if and when the United States Senate will vote to see if we can fill our spot on the Supreme Court. Also, number 2 on our list this week is we want to talk about the fact that the National Urban League submitted comments on the duty to serve rule. Now, what is the duty to serve rule? Well, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which is a very important agency in the federal government. Many of you may not have heard of it, but the Federal Housing Finance Agency is really an important agency for housing guidelines. We at the Washington Bureau and the National Urban League, we submitted comments on a rule called the Duty to Serve Rule. And the Duty to Serve Rule will require the Federal Housing Finance Agency to provide access to housing in really 3 underserved areas. 1, manufactured housing. 2, affordable housing preservation, and 3, in rural markets. And so those are all 3 very important markets to the National Urban League, especially manufactured housing and affordable housing preservation. And as you know, housing and access to housing is one of our key components that we work on at the National Urban League each and every day. And so we did put in comments on the duty to serve rule to hope that the Federal Housing and Finance Agency will continue doing the right thing to make sure that every American has an opportunity to reach the American dream and own his or her own home if they so choose to do so. In our affiliate highlight this week, we want to send a shout out to our good friend Mike McMillan, the CEO and president of the Urban League of Metropolitan St. Louis. We talk about Mike all the time because, as you know, the folks in St. Louis and that area, Ferguson, Missouri, they've had a lot to do and focus on over the last couple of years. We wanted to say congratulations to Mike and his team. They tripled the size of its job and education center, which is planned for the Ferguson area. They've already tripled the size. They obtained a great donation of $2.1 million. And that building, that center, which will become a community center to help people get educated and get jobs and learn more about ways to pull themselves up, it will stand in place of the Quick Trip gas station that many of you saw during the protest after the loss of Michael Brown. So congratulations to you, Mike. Continue the great work. And we're just a proud partner of the Metropolitan League of the Urban League of Metropolitan St. Louis. I want to also give you an update on our sentencing reform efforts. You may recall we've talked about this in the past, but there are 2 pieces of legislation that are circulating in Congress, one in the House, one in the Senate. Both deal with mandatory minimum, reducing some of the mandatory minimums that were placed during the 90s when many people of color were unduly and unfairly targeted with these mandatory minimum sentences for crack cocaine when other types of drugs did not have those types of sentences. So we're trying to change that. But there are also some movements in the Senate and the House to create new mandatory minimums. And so we at the National Urban League's Washington Bureau, we're watching those bills. Obviously, we want to see relief for people who were unfairly treated, but we don't want to create another problem. And so we're going to continue to watch and bring you up to speed on the sentencing reform legislation. And then last but not least, I just want to reiterate an invite that I made to many of you, to all of you, last year, which is we here at the Washington Bureau, we stand ready to serve you. If your team, if your young professionals group, or your guild, or your office wants to come to Washington to do a fly-in or to talk to people in the administration, please consider using us as a resource, as your office, as a tool. We love to help you with advocacy training. We can also help accompany your team to Capitol Hill or to a federal state agency. Or we can also just talk to you about some of the things that are going on the Hill to make sure that you have the up-to-date news on what's happening. So if you want to make your fly-in to the nation's capital a success, please consider using the team here at the Washington Bureau. Remember, we work for you. Well, that's going to do it for my top 5 things. Thanks for what you do in and for the movement. I'm Don Cravens. I'll see you next week.